Thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you for having me. It's an honour, honestly an honour, to be here talking to this esteemed group of people who, again, like as Gregor said this morning, I don't feel like I'm telling you anything you don't already know, but anyway, I'm going to share my story anyway, because I came all the way here, so I may as well, right? So, pilot to platinum. What on earth are we talking about? As Alison just mentioned, I was very fortunate to be part of a team implementing our PebblePad strategy university-wide, part of the project team. And the team was made up of an academic developer, Christine, myself as a learning designer, and a functional analyst. We only had a tiny little bit of his time. So I must confess, I was not even involved in the very early stages. However, once we hit the ground running and once we actually committed to purchasing the licenses, that's where my journey began with this particular project. And partway through, I guess it was early last year-ish, we decided, with a little bit of encouragement from Jodie and Alison, that we would apply for a LearnX award in Australia. And it's a, LearnX is a organisation, I guess for want of a better term, that celebrates and recognises e-learning and the place of e-learning corporately mostly. So we were playing in the big corporate pond. So you think budgets, you think organisations that are a little more agile than universities, and so we were a little nervous throwing a hat into the ring with that calibre, I guess, of competition. However, we were triumphant in our category, which was for university-wide implementation or for an organisational-wide implementation. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of what that journey was for us. I don't know if this clicker's powered. Oh, I got it out of the pouch, but I don't know if the other bit's plugged in. I can just come back and click the analogue way.
No, we could.
Oh.
Just give it a second.
Clicker power, go. Yay. Okay, so Prepilot, back in the days before I was involved. Christine and Keith started a feasibility study with institutional backing. Now I want to emphasise that. I think that was really key. We had institutional backing from the get-go for the feasibility study. The Deputy Vice-Chancellor was very keen to explore the space of e-portfolios, student engagement and learning. So I think that was very important in the beginning. It was also supported by academics. When the guys started, Christine and Keith started, they actually talked to academics and asked them what they wanted. It doesn't seem like a stretch or a novel idea, but we've heard some interesting cases of institutions making these decisions around technologies and not having spoken to a single academic about their practice. So they went and started by talking to the people that were actually going to be out at the coalface. Although Pebble doesn't pilot, we heard that earlier, we piloted. We didn't want to call it a trial. Christine was very adamant, this isn't a trial because we've got institutional backing, so it's not a trial. We know we're doing it, but we just want to see how it pans out. So in 2000, I'm going to get my years wrong here, I guess it was 12 or 13, it comes up in a minute. We piloted with 2 courses, and they were deliberately chosen. One of them particularly because the academic had put her hand up as very keen, and she had come from Canada where she had been using ePortfolio software, and this was in occupational therapy. So we started with a group of 100-ish first year OT students with her, and we also then started with a group of about 12 midwifery masters students, and for tracking all of their continuity of care cases. I firmly believe, though, that the decisions that were made at this point were primarily what set us up for success. The decisions were made that this would be implemented at a program level. The decisions were made that we'd be including academics. The decisions were made that we were very much about student outcomes. So, with that in mind, I think it's important to know exactly what you want to get out of your implementation. Begin as you mean to go on is actually one of my favourite sayings. So that was definitely the case here. So here we go, there's the year, I told you it would come. We launched in 2013 with this early adopter phase, I just told you all of that. And then at very, very, very late 2013, like knife's edge late, we actually found out we had the funding to go institutional wide, to buy our licenses, to pay for Shane to do more stuff, you know, out there, buy us more drinks at conferences and stuff. And personally, importantly, pay for me to be part of the project team. So that was really key for us to continue. And we were told, literally it was just the week before Christmas, that we were funded for the next semester. And obviously by then we'd started already talking to people to plan for Sem 1. So we were kind of going to be going ahead with at least a couple of courses anyway. Right. So this is where when we look back, and I think part of the plan wasn't that we would be in 3 phases, but when we looked at it, we thought, yeah, there are 3 phases to this implementation. We had a feasibility study. Then they had the early adopter phase, or the pilot, we could call it early adopter phase. And then we had the uni-wide rollout. So there were 3 fairly different ways of approaching what we were doing in our implementation. It became really clear that agility was needed as we moved through this process. And something that we identified as a theme was our plan, act and evaluate critical reflection cycle. We've actually got a chapter coming out about that in a book that's coming out very soon, published through an OLT grant through Sydney Uni. So obviously will be highly regarded reading for all of you when you want to, you know, bedtime reading. But talking through our process and the fact that at each stage, this plan, act and evaluate was really crucial to being agile enough to respond to the changing needs and to things that we'd planned to go kind of one direction, but you know that real life actually happens and it doesn't quite go the way that you think it's going to go. So not everything goes to plan, but you definitely need to have one so that you've got somewhere, a point of reference to begin. And then we had to act to adjust to the needs, to the changing needs, to the changing student body, and to other changing technologies. And it wasn't until we'd dipped our toe in front of real life students on more of a grand scale than 2 courses that we really could see what kind of mechanisms we needed to put in place for things like academic support and for student support. On that note, my central unit, Centre for Supportive Learning and Teaching, we don't have any mandate for student-facing work, so we don't speak to students. I find that incredibly difficult, particularly when you have an academic who just wants some help with the student and then they say, can you just contact Priscilla? Anyway, I won't go into all of that, but the fact that we needed to reach the student via a third party but not have the message distilled became something that we had to get quite good at. And once we then changed our process, it was all about, let's think about whether that was the best way to do it. Oh yeah, okay, yes, we've changed what we thought we were going to do. Let's then put that into place. So we were always in this stage of critical reflection. So in terms of adjusting to needs, sorry, let me just quickly go, yeah. So we had a programmatic approach. And these are the programs that all together now have touched Pebble and been in touch with Pebble. And obviously we've got some health and education in there, but we've got communications and PR, advertising is coming, or they're part of communications, sport and exercise science, serious game development. You know, that's another really cool use that's come on board this semester. Psych, TPP is our tertiary preparatory pathway unit, so students before they actually come in, they do some preparatory semesters. So there's a lot of diversity there. And so originally, when we started with just the 2 courses, sorry, I just saw something moving at the side of my eye and it's the Twitter feed. Originally, when we just started with the 2 courses, it was fairly easy to get the teaching group, the course coordinator and the tutors, if there happened to be any. It was fairly easy to get them in the same room with me or Keith and I often, and talk them through and do a little bit of a PebblePad training session. And we'd be telling them, and we were V3, obviously this was back in 2013, and we were teaching them the the buy we with me and for me and the assets and resources. Well, we've still got those, but you know, we do a whole, you know, blah. This is everything you need to know about PebblePad. And they would kind of visibly tense up as you were going through the sessions, and I'm thinking, it's supposed to make them feel better, not worse. And upon reflection, I realised that we were trying to give them too much information all at once. They didn't need to be PebblePad experts, and they felt like they did because they then felt like it was all on them to teach their students to be PebblePad experts. But what we realised was that, let's take a look at our cohort and our students. How do they learn? They learn at midnight on YouTube, just in time. So I started to do things a little bit differently, and I would meet with course coordinators one-on-one, and I would say to them, I'm going to make you a video, a narrated video, on how students will access your workbook or template or whatever it happened to be, and you don't need to teach them anything. We'll put some help resources up about what the terminology is. We sometimes would embed help within portfolios and, workbooks and templates itself. So we tried a few different things there, but at the centre of that was the videos, the online or the help videos, which were lived online. They lived in the same space in Blackboard where the students would access their login link. So they didn't have to go anywhere different to find it. They were in the LMS anyway, and they could just click the video and watch, like karaoke, watch how to open their resource and fill it in. We figured, not that we were making assumptions about the digital literacy of the generation, because I think we widely overestimate that, but we figured that once they were in there, they would then be able to figure most things out. In terms of filling it in, I mean, some things are not that obvious, you know, the live nature of the assessment, you know, those little things. But the general stuff, filling it in, saving it, we were hoping that those skills could be transferred from using a computer in other ways. And by and large, that was the case. So once these videos started rolling out to students, the academics were much more relaxed. And they realised that they didn't need to be the font of all truth when it came to Pebble. They didn't need to learn this system inside out. And that was a changing point for our implementation. So, I've skipped ahead a little bit. So what we did, we were very specific about the fact that we wanted to map the use of PebblePad across programs. We were not really, is that right? Or someone's just clapping. we were not really interested in students touching Pebble once. We realised that it was a system that really had no use for a student if they were only in there one time in their whole entire degree. What was the point? We also engaged a lot with the wider ePortfolio and Pebble communities, and we learnt from this, and the fact that 2 out of 3 of us taught as well, we learnt that students don't do things for nothing. There's got to be a value system in there for a student to be engaged enough to do something. And it wasn't really that we wanted to design assessment portfolios, but unless students are being engaged through assessment, there's little incentive for them to engage with their portfolio. So it's all very well to say to a first year, hey everyone, welcome to first year, first semester. You're going to need all this stuff to prove what you've done through your whole degree. And students don't understand that in first year. They don't think of themselves as a graduate when they come to you in first year or fresh and new. They just want to get through that semester or that day sometimes. So encouraging them to do things for their future selves they just don't get it. So that's why, obviously, you know, we all do it. We build assessment into the portfolio so that it kind of tricks them into making a collection of these fantastic a collection of evidence that they can then, when they get to 4th year, they look back and go, oh, thank God, I've got all that. I didn't leave it all on a USB under the bed, you know, or I didn't, you know, drop my laptop in a pond and lose everything I've worked for ever. So they were and we're now seeing this in our 4th years, that they are kind of by surreptitiously being trained to put things in their portfolio, which is kind of the point of why we wanted to embed across programs. We wanted to make sure that students were making a link across all of the learning that they were doing in the program, which, as we know, is one of the great things about portfolio learning or portfolio-based learning. We're not losing it every semester in the LMS. They're not losing the ability to log in and find their stuff. They have this across their entire degree program. We had buy-in from academics, obviously, as I said earlier, but the important thing with the buy-in from academics is that it leads to buy-in from students. We saw, as I mentioned, when we started implementing a different support system for academics, we saw them relax, and they were then more comfortable in normalising the use of the tool. And I think, and I come back to that word, normalising, and I think it's so key. You can't have an academic stand up and be really frightened and tense and visibly like, oh, we're just trying this new thing and I'm just touch it and just hope it doesn't blow up, you know. How do you feel when as a student, when someone's not confident in what they're trying to tell you to invest in? Well, you wouldn't. So once we were able to say to academics, just no big deal. It's okay, it's all going to be okay. Get up there and just normalise it. We aligned with graduate capabilities or graduate attributes. Thank you. And I'm talking on that tomorrow, so if you really want to hear more on that, come to that tomorrow. And I said we'd have embedded in learning and assessment. And one of the big things, obviously, that we all do is teach students to map, track and showcase their skills. Just some numbers for the numbers people. I overlaid the actual user, so on this side, with no real key thing, is from 285 up to 3646. There are actual, not logins, but users with files. So I thought that was really interesting. Like, we've got way more logins, active users, but they're not with files. So these are the ones that have files, and the growth in that across the years, so from SEM 1 2014. And the courses, now that may not seem like many. When I put this up earlier in the year and someone said, but how many courses do you have at the university? You've got 35 using Pebble. Doesn't seem like many. And I thought, my answer was a bit silly. I said, oh yeah, but you know, we've done all right. And when I thought about it, what I should have said was, yes, but these are really high traffic courses. They're big courses, they're big cohorts. You know, we might have 500 courses a semester, but some have got 2 students. So, you know, we're not looking at those guys. Well, these are the big ones. And these are the professional courses and, you know, the ones that have lots of impact. So our institution has just hit 11,000 students. So I think 3,500 of them that have files in Pebble, that's kind of okay. I also looked this morning at some of these courses double up and some of them don't. So it's not cumulative, the amount of courses that are using semester to semester, but cumulatively, I did this exercise for fun this morning, we've had 70 different courses across the institution use it. So again, that's interesting in itself. All right, I'm gonna run out of time. So it's not just a portfolio. We use tutorial workbooks. We use workbooks that are not assessed, but are part of the tutorial activities, formative assessment obviously, and we also have tutorial workbooks where the weekly learning materials are delivered through the tutorial workbook. We use portfolios as learning, and I'm probably not going to show the videos because I'm going to run out of time. And it helps obviously connect learning across and knowledge across the whole program. So we know that that's one of the fantastic benefits of having the connections across the portfolio. We have quick wins in digital literacy because students feel empowered to be able to use these tools, and academics also feel empowered to be able to put them in their programs. Staff use, talking about that tomorrow too. So come along to that session if you want to hear about that. All right, these videos actually demonstrate, and you can probably get a little bit of an idea from the two side by side. So this is the teaching portfolio. This is to our preparatory students, and the course is digital literacies. So these are students that are quite often, I probably should have said, our institution's probably lower socioeconomic and a lot of first in family attendees. So digital literacies is a big deal for people that are returning to university and coming into the preparatory courses. So our tutor and course coordinator, he actually models through a portfolio the way that the submission, like the portfolios that are going to be assessed. And these are incredible, and I've talked too much to be able to play them. But, well, the portfolios are incredible. It doesn't show the whole thing in the video. But they have the students walk through their learning journey in weeks, the same way that the tutor builds the portfolio in the weeks that he's teaching them with the skills that they're learning week to week. It's very clever. And it wants to play, and I'm just going to skip. Okay, so challenges. I've talked a little bit about this training, who will teach my students. So we made some, at first they were bespoke, there's that word again, bespoke resources that I was making for everyone, and when there's only one of me and more of them every semester, I realised I had to go generic. So I had to do a generic template and a generic workbook on the videos. They now just live generically in our LMS. We've got a side navigation that is always there, and we turn it on if they're using the PebblePad. So, I'm being really quick now. Be careful of wanting it more than they do. And I'll say this to a particular course. We wanted a particular course to come on board, and we were really sure it was going to work. And it would have had the course coordinator given a damn about actually making it work. That's all I'm going to say about that. I'm not talking about that tomorrow, so that's another day. Challenges is also moving to organisational support, and that's the phase I'm kind of in now. I'm not on the project, but I'm full-time employed as a learning designer, still in the same office, still with the same phone number, still with the same email address. So people they haven't cut the umbilical cord. It's still PebblePad Priscilla for everything that they need. So trying to go to support. So that's a challenge, and I think one of the things that we may have thought about sooner was embedding institutional support in the very beginning. So for first line support stuff, and I'm not talking about learning design, but the other stuff. So the platinum, I've talked about all of this. Sustainable approach with resources, done. All right, one of the big things, the big takeaway, I think, in our implementation is trust. My academics, and I think of them like little baby ducklings, they trust me, and I have worked really hard to develop that trust with them. I've seen them physically, and I've seen them sit like this across and like, I'm not doing that. It's not going to happen. Sorry, I shouldn't have come. Too hard. And I say, whoever it happens to be in front of me, you need to trust me. You will go away and be very confused. You will then sit and play, and you'll hit some keys, and you'll be a little cranky, and you'll hate me, and that's okay. But there'll be a light bulb moment, I guarantee it. And you'll come back to me and say, oh, I get it now. So I tell them that that's the process that they're going to have. And they all do, every single one of them. So they trust me from that moment because I've told them what's going to happen, and it did. So then we're besties. And once you are besties, you'll do whatever your bestie tells you, right? So trust, take nothing else away from this but trust. You need to have the trust of the people that you're working with. So, it must be safe to fail. And by having their trust, you are building a team of champions who will then go forth and prosper. Thank you.